documents out, got basically fired over it, and her book documents that, the deliberate dumbing down of America. But then she's also the lady that helped give Anthony Sutton the material that exposed Skull and Bones. But in decades later, continuing to research, that was hiding under her nose as well, that it was Skull and Bones that actually set the modern policy for all of this. Now you were getting into the Illuminati connections. Charlotte, go ahead.
Well, this is fascinating. I mean, things that happen in my life are unbelievable. You're right. For about 30 years, I did all the research on B.F. Skinner and Pavlov and how these methods, like the reading method, direct instruction, that the conservatives managed to get across the country now because it's necessary for workforce training. Of course, they got into reading first, experimenting on the minorities with it, etc. But I was studying this stuff, and I knew it makes children sick. I have a friend, a great teacher in Arizona, Ann Herzer, who educated me, and I have all the documents from doctors about how this operant conditioning, these programs make children sick. And, anyway, so here I'm looking at all this. I have all the major documents. It takes me quite a long time. I understand that, but I had no idea that the order at Yale that my father and grandfather belonged to, it was the order that actually brought this method back from Germany. And it's very interesting. You see, the Germans are extremely involved in this. They were, and perhaps still are. I mean, in the fluoride thing and all. Dennis Cuddy's just written a wonderful new book, which my son is reading, and which deals with how all of this stuff is the Germans, is Nazi stuff too. So it's not just the communists; it's the Nazis, the fascists, the socialists. I always say America's not an ism country, but we are really deep in the mess right now with the isms. But anyway, going back to the order, so little Charlotte, the one that gets fired from the department for leaking these documents. I knew how bad the Department of Education was. It's total Marxist factory, right? All of a sudden, I find out most of this, I found out from Anthony Sutton, who had done the research. He's the one who found out about the connection with Wilhelm Wundt with the Illuminati. Wilhelm Wundt's grandfather was a member of the Illuminati. Well, I remember I sent Tony Sutton, there were some documents in German that I never saw again, but I sent them to Sutton. I didn't know what they were, but Sutton got them, and I don't know whether I lost them when he returned them. But anyway, I am quite truly convinced that, let's look at it this way, folks. There is nothing more important than the loss of free will. We have a soul and a conscience. What was brought back from Germany, operant conditioning, Pavlov studied under Wundt, this is the method to destroy the human individual made in the image of God, to destroy his conscience. You must remember this. You probably think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. This is what we're looking at. This is more important than anything being talked about in the news today. The loss of the conscience. I've written a lot on this. It's on the internet. You can find my articles. This is what happened when the order at Yale decided to get their guys, educated in Germany, and many of it was G. Stanley Hall was the first one, and he admits to being half a Marxist himself, back in the mid-1800s, mind you. He admitted to that. So he brings it back. It's picked up by Dewey and Thorndike, etc., and the method goes into the teachers' colleges, and our teachers are trained to train our students. Train, not educate. Of course, this didn't happen until 1965. Now, the results of this, one could see this morning. I opened up the computer, and I was Fox News, interesting enough, which won't cover my book, of course. But they did cover, oh, my goodness me, how can this be possible? This Jack Chambers, an economic professor at a college, I didn't get it all written down, he asked his students what the American dream means to them. This is in college. And he asked specifically, what do you want the government, what do you think the government should do? Well, 10%, good for them, said, leave me alone. 80% said that the government should take care of their vacations, make sure they get a good job, give them health care, give them housing, and that the wealthy should be taxed. more. Now, there was one individual who said, can you believe this one? As human beings, we are not responsible for our actions. We need the government to keep us in line, sort of. Now, that's not a direct quote. I just sort of remember that. But first of all, this individual who says we need the government to keep us in line and we're not responsible for our actions, that student evidently was very carefully trained in Darwin. That were animals. So they made a mistake. They still think they're human beings, but they're not.
Well, you're right.
Lots of people have been conditioned and trained like animals all the way through from the time that G. Stanley Hall went over to Germany for the order and came back, retrained, and now what we're looking at is the computer technology is nothing but Pavlovian.
And that allows total centralization of the message, but expanding on that, and we see a global curriculum being standardized. I've seen the studies that there are now more sociopaths than there used to be, and even more psychopaths, and that the system is creating artificial sociopaths. Normally their numbers were much lower, but they can also have it where they flip on a switch that makes you a sociopath, but they can flip it back off when they want you to feel. So it's total programming. It's like they're biological androids. It's so scientifically done. How is their plan going along for them from your deep research of this from every angle?
Well, I'm afraid they're highly successful. And the reason for this, Alex, is another thing that has always bewildered us. Why is it that, for instance, when I wrote my book in 1985, the little 39-pager, Back to Basics Reform, that exposed all of this Skinner stuff and said it was for world government, which would arrive, in the 21st century, all of that book was boycotted across the board by the conservative movement. If that book had been listened to in 1985, we might not have this Skinnerian opera conditioning on the computers, et cetera, right now. But they boycotted. Now wait a minute, isn't that interesting? The conservatives. This is under Ronald Reagan, okay? And so anyway, that happened, and then I wrote my big book because I figured maybe this will get. Well, that was boycotted by them too. They've done nothing to get the big book. They do not want this information. Now, I'm sure the Democrats are involved in it as well, and they've paid for the funding, and they love the Department of Education, blah, blah, blah. But I have to say that the school-to-work agenda, which requires school choice is the most devastatingly bad thing that ever happened to this country because it's not really school choice whatsoever. It's federally funded charter schools that don't have elected officials running them because the corporations are going to run those charter schools to train for the workforce with the Skinnerian opera conditioning on the computer. Now, this is the conservatives supporting this because conservatives are notable for wanting to make money, right? I mean, we know that. It's nothing wrong with making money. But when you decide that you're going to turn your children over to be nothing but slaves in this planned economy, to be moved around the world, and a lot of these quotes in my book from educators, they're going to be moved around the world wherever they need them, using nothing but computer technology, opera conditioning, et cetera, to train them lifelong, all of this.
Yeah, but Charlotte, there's also all these globalist groups now pushing the solution to the New World Order is mega computers that make all the decisions for us, but really those computers are programmed by the globalists themselves. It's a new form of tyranny.
Yes, it is. And Alex, what we have to understand is that we've lost the. I hate to say this, and maybe it's not completely true, but I believe we have lost the Christian community. Because the Christian community, the evangelicals, we always depended on them to support us in trying to get rid of these bad programs, especially, Skinner and all. I never got any support for them from that community. In fact, they even said that some of us were nutty. They said that we didn't know what we were talking about with Skinner. We were wrong about these computerized, individualized education software and all. They went up against us. And I always wonder what is going on. Well, now we know because they have, they have been trained by Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker went all over the country.
I'll tell you what, stay there. Let's expose systems. Sure, let's expose that and talk about Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They now are funding and running a lot of these, quote, charter schools. Part of it, of course, is tax money still. And they're openly teaching eugenics, kill granny for money. I mean, everything. All right, we're going to have a giant news blitz, I promise, at 40 after when Charlotte Iserbyt leaves us. Whistleblower, author, researcher, patriot. And again, she's not against you having school choice, but this is now just the corporations taking over the old local, quote, independent school district system, draining off their funding, putting only in a little bit of their money, and getting control. Now, you were breaking down how you discovered why you were blocked by, quote, conservatives, but then also take the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They are involved in education at every level. They're involved, just like Obama was, breaking up local schools and turning them over to corporations. That's what they're now doing. And I could play clips of Bill Gates up there saying, you don't give grandma health care, we can hire 10 teachers, and the teachers clapping. So they're even selling this idea of cannibalism, that you take something away from somebody, you get their resources. That's not how the world really works. It's a win-win-win. Build the pie system is what we want, not a post-industrial shut-it-down system. So it's incredibly dangerous and classically authoritarian. But you notice with the TSA checkpoints and the groping of our families, I mean, they admit the TSA stuff is to break you, is to train you, is to Pavlovianly get you used to them putting their hands on your body. I mean, this is all dog training, as you said.
Well, yes, Alex, and talking about the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates is totally involved in putting us under this international socialist system, or whatever you want to call it, fascist, communist, totalitarian system. He's very involved. I mean, Microsoft has got agreements with communist China and Russia and everywhere, and Gates has signed all sorts of agreements himself, and so really bad. Now, talking about the foundations, let's get there. The tax-exempt foundations. You can go to my son's website, AmericanDeception.com, and you've got the transcript of the congressional investigation of the tax-exempt foundations there. There was only one copy left in the country 3 years ago because the foundations bought up all the copies. They didn't want the American people to know what had happened in 1953 when all these traitors had to answer questions during the investigation. They bought up all the copies. They got them all out of circulation except this one. The person I bought it from, I understand that he was offered any amount of money for that one copy, and he turned it down. I got the copy. My son put it up on the website. 3,000 pages of documentation. That was the investigation where Norman Dodd of the Reese Committee went up to New York, and off the record, that's why it's not on the internet, it's not in the transcript, but off the record, the president of the Ford Foundation, Rowan Gaither, said to him, Mr. Dodd, we get our instructions from the White House how to use our money. Eisenhower at the peak of the Cold War, that was. And the instructions were to change America. The foundation should change America to such an extent it could be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. Now, look, of course, you say it's dead. No, it's not. Communism, fascism, socialism, internationalism are all exactly what Gaither was talking
Exactly.
about.
A fool sent me emails saying you're calling it fascist or socialist. They're two different things. No, there's different dressing, little different tweaks, right. But it's all black uniforms, all government run, all surveillance, all state planned with the corporations over it. It's all the same thing.
That's exactly what we're looking at. So what Dodd was told is absolutely correct. Gaither told him it would be this merger. And if you go back to Lenin said, look, first of all countries individually become socialist.
That's what Carroll Quigley wrote. He said there's not a difference between fascism and communism. We work with all of it. We are creating a fusion of it.
But they merge, once they're socialist, then they merge in regions. So we've got all the regions being set up.